folks. Matt McQueenie, Mix Minus Podcast. It is April 5th, a Monday. Big weekend that just passed for me. We had been planning, we being my brother Mike, who's 4 years younger than I, and my father, who will be turning 70 in June. We planned this year, because we did not go to spring training this year. I did go to spring training with my wife and my son Liam last year with my dad. It's been several years since my brother Mike, who has two daughters who are, I believe, 4 and going on 2. So there is just not a lot of opportunity to get out much and do that kind of trip. Again, I did get to go last year, which was great. But I obviously just had my second son, Connor, in February. And spring training, basically it was the start of spring training when he came. So there was going to be no shot in going. Once my wife had been added to the mix and my son last year, it's especially hard as well to cut off and go on your own with your dad, with your brother. You have a lot of difficulties. You have a lot of things you need to work through in order to do that. And it's just something that is not in the cards. You're not going to be able to do that. And I understand that. And I wasn't pushing to go. But my dad asked if my brother and I would be willing to go to Syracuse, New York. Boy, trading Sarasota for Syracuse isn't quite the trip that you're dreaming of when you're thinking of early April or March. But the reason we looked at that is because the next best thing to going to spring training is to go into minor league baseball. They have great cities you would never think of. There's all these cities around the country are up and coming and have plenty of restaurants, plenty of options, entertainment, and they're really going to kind of work for you to get it. It's not like going to New York where New York could take you or leave you. They'll still give you service, but it's not like they're dying to have you. Some of these cities, Scranton last year around Labor Day, we went to see the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Yankees or Rail Riders play the Pawtucket Red Sox, and it was a tremendous time. And all the options you can do, entertainment, food, they're going to work hard for your buck and for your attention. And so there is something to be said about going to some of these cities. And so Syracuse, why Syracuse? Well, starting this season, the New York Mets AAA affiliate went from Las Vegas to Syracuse. So now it's a real neat little logistical situation where you have the New York Mets in New York, you have their AA team in Binghamton, and then right up Route 81, you have the AAA team in Syracuse. And my family has had a home about an hour and a half slight due northwest of Syracuse in the Thousand Islands region. They have had a home there since the very time I was born. So we're looking at, coming up on 37 years here. So Syracuse has always been kind of a stop on the way. And Syracuse has always had AAA. We would go see a lot of Syracuse Chiefs games at the time. They were the AAA affiliate of the Toronto Blue Jays. I actually saw Carlos Delgado play there. I think I saw Sean Green. Is it possible I saw John Olerud? Maybe. But I saw a lot of players go through there. And I think in more recent years that they might have been a AAA affiliate of the Nationals, because I can remember or recall Steven Strasburg pitching out of there, the great national wonderkind. Hasn't quite had the career I think that we thought when he initially came on the scene, when we all felt we had to watch every one of his pitching outings. He's not quite lived up to that hype, though very few can. I mean, you're thinking of almost like a Doc Gooden type of entrance into the MLB. But they have been a AAA for several teams, and now they're the Mets, so it's a really nice kind of situation. And of all people, Tim Tebow will be playing there. He has made the move from Binghamton last year in AA, now to AAA. I think he's 31, 32, so who knows if he's going to be in the major leagues at any point. The Mets might bring him up almost in a Disney movie type capacity where they reward the guy for all the toil and all the efforts to change sports and to get back into a sport at the highest reaches of the game after a decade of fallow play, of not being actually in the mix, of not swinging a bat, of not fielding, of being a football player whose chest was so big that you couldn't even swing correctly. So there is a lot of stuff going on, and it's always fun to go to minor league baseball because you show up, it's the experience almost of major leagues, and as you get further up in the A's, as you go to single A, double A, triple A, the stadiums get to be close to the size of the major league team. The players, it's always fun to open up the program and to see what players are on the teams. And oh my God, I forgot about that guy. He was a player 5 years ago for such and such a team. He's on the attempted comeback of some sort to get with the major league club. I remember being at Scranton last year, and the Pawtucket Red Sox had Brandon. Shoot, what was that guy? The guy who was the I feel like a dummy because I didn't, there's a little stream of consciousness, so I didn't really think through that. But he was the Brandon Phillips. That's who it was. He was that great Cincinnati Red, and he made over like $100 million in his career. And here he was trying to slog it in his late 30s to get a chance at getting back to the big leagues with a team who went on to win the World Series. I don't think he made the postseason roster, but I do remember when he did get called up, and I think he hit a home run in his first game with the Red Sox against the Braves, if I do recall. So it was very interesting to watch him in that final weekend of the AAA season in Scranton, and think of what he was doing, staying in those local hotels, not quite the ritzy experience of a Major League ball player. Sort of a, what is it? It's going from like the Four Seasons to the 5 Points Sheraton. Is it 5 points? I believe. But you get the point. From not quite from the penthouse to the outhouse. In no way do I mean that, but you're going from one way of living to sort of a middle class existence in the sport. And so it is a lot of fun to go to these. It's almost, there's a lot of wonderment when you show up. You see who's going to pitch, you see who's on the roster, you see who the manager is, you see how the local populace kind of identifies with the teams, and it is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to see the next great players as well. Now, you don't get that as much in AAA. You get that more in AA for some reason. AAA almost takes on a more of a lifer feel. So it's minor leaguers who maybe had a couple cups of coffee in the major leagues, but you want to have you want to sort of have players who are going to almost be with that AAA team year after year. They're going to play out most of that season with that team, and really almost have a winning product for that local city. It's less of a farm team and more of almost a team on its own accord. Not 100% true, but it does feel that way. It feels almost with AA that it's about developing the players, the younger players, to get to the major leagues, and maybe they could take a quick stop over in AAA on their way, but AA seems to be the place for whatever reason that handles that. But with the Mets now in Syracuse, it opens up an opportunity to go see them. I'd love to go see them when they were in Las Vegas, but it feels logistically insane to be that far away from the AAA to the Major League team. It's across the country, literally, just too far. And so the call-ups and the call-downs and all that stuff just gets intense. And for the fans, there's no regional connection there. When they're here, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, they used to be in Buffalo for many years, the Mets, and the Buffalo Bisons. And so that made some sense, obviously, being a lot closer, but Syracuse is really close, relatively really close. And so my dad said, hey, for my 70th, we didn't get to go to spring training. You guys both have 2 kids now. It's really tough. Matt, you have a baby. That's a real tough one to leave, boy. Real hard having a non-business trip and telling your wife you're going to do that. But she wasn't all on board with it, but over time she kind of had to be. And I also got replacements for myself. I had my mom. She nicely stayed at our house overnight, and it was a Friday. We were leaving last Friday, so we had our childcare in place as well for the majority of the day. It would have been hard doing this from a Saturday to a Sunday. The amount of coverage I would have had to get in my place would have been tough. Might have not made the trip worth it, but we made it work, and so we set sails to go up to Syracuse. First game of the season was Thursday. Friday was going to be the second game of the season. It was going to be a 1 p.m. start, and we were going to leave my house up in Sparta around 10 a.m. because it was going to take my brother about an hour to get to my house, and he had childcare duties he had to do through much of the morning. And so we got off at 10, and we just were driving. I hadn't eaten. I actually got in a workout that morning because I was like, man, when we go on these trips, we eat like kings for that night. So I wanted to really, especially because we're going to be doing so much travel. It's actually 3.5 hours from where I live to Syracuse. And I'm sort of at the closest point from all of us, between where my dad is in Mahwah, where my brother is in Westfield. And so we left from my house. And so I got a good workout in, a Peloton 30-minute ride, some lifting. And I just didn't eat. I had had coffee before, as I always do, but I figured, hey, we'll get something on the road. Now, one of the things we love to do in Florida at spring training is go to Waffle House. And there are not many Waffle Houses in the Northeast, much to our chagrin. I'd love to have one in New Jersey. I don't know why there aren't any. Maybe I can be the mogul that brings the Waffle Houses to New Jersey. But there are some in Pennsylvania, and there are especially some around Scranton. There's several downtown, and there is one north of the city in a town called Clark Summit, PA. And that was like an hour and 40 minutes probably from my house. So when we left at 10, it might have actually been 2 hours, to be honest, because we got into the, or maybe we left a little later. Yeah, maybe an hour 40, because we got into Clark Summit around 12:20. So I hadn't eaten all day. I was ready. I was loaded for bear to get my All-Star Special in. And so we rolled in, and we got our food. And, of course, there's a Starbucks around, no matter how rural you can get sometimes, in this Clark Summit, PA, across the street. We got some Starbucks, and then we had at that point leading up to the Waffle House, we got a message through Twitter or whatever that the game was going to be postponed to the next day at noon. We weren't going to be able to make that work because I had to be home as close to noon as possible, because my mom would be leaving. It's a whole domino effect when you got the kids, the youngsters, and your wife anxious about it all. And so we got the note that it was going to be a postponement, but we weren't going to turn around. Because we had all these contingencies and childcare solutions in place, we were going to go for it. Yeah, it's a bummer we aren't going to get to see the game, but hey, we'll stay overnight in a hotel. The hotel, the Embassy Suites we were going to stay at up there, is right on the campus of the beautiful, what used to be called the Carousel Mall. Now it's called Destiny USA. It's one of the bigger malls in the country. And I remember going up there towards our summer home. It was always like the gleaming kind of, monolithic structure on the hill. It had everything. And it was always that way until locally where we live, where we grew up in Mahwah, over at Nyack, which is probably about 15, 20 minutes from my house there, the Palisade Center opened up. That might be slightly bigger than the Destiny USA Mall. So that kind of de-emphasized how important that was. But still, when you get up there, it is impressive. It's got everything. It's got comedy club. It's got, the movie theater, the big stadium movie theater. It's got every restaurant you can think of. It's a city within an internal structure. And in the winters up there, which can be brutal, it was still brutal when we were there. It was 32, I believe. With as cold as it gets up there, you need an indoor facility like that. So we were going to have a fine time. We were going to figure out what we'd eat. We'd get some drinks in. We would, go to the manager's special, which is our favorite thing at Embassy Suites, where it's either 5 to 7 or 5:30 to 7:30, depending on the location. It's pretty much free drinks and snacks. So it's a great little value add to a hotel. And it brings a lot of people together. You can kind of pregame, get a couple drinks in for free before you head to dinner, and really get yourself feeling good and lubricated. So we got up there around, I'd say 3:15. My dad goes to check in, and they had nothing on the check-in. So I had gotten our tickets for the game. I had checked us into the hotel. I got the AAA. I got the AARP. I got all the discounts you can get, the prepays, all that. And they were like, no, nothing's coming up. Nothing's coming up. And I came up, and I'm like, oh, my God. I totally had the screen. Is it possible that I didn't actually book it, that I got everything set and I didn't book it, and here we are up in Syracuse? What are we going to do? And so my dad said, oh, okay, well, do you have any rooms available? And the guy said, no. And we went, oh, boy, okay. And so we, like fools, stepped aside, and we allowed the next customer to come up and get their room. And so we walked away, and we're like, ooh, what are we going to do here? Beauty of the internet is there's always a solution. You're never out there on your own with no way to fix a situation. And so what I did is I remembered I had this app, Hotel Tonight. You hear about it all the time. It's sort of an app where on the day of your stay, or maybe they've extended a little more to days before, but it's the idea of it started that you can open this app, Hotel Tonight, in the city you are, and you're going to get a reduced rate on a room because they have their own inventory or because they've been given their own inventory, and you can kind of get in on what's, if there's some leftover rooms that need to be filled. And so funny enough, I open up the app in the in the lobby of this Embassy Suites, and there was the Embassy Suites right there in the list, and they had rooms. So I went ahead, booked it. We walked back up to the front, and they had our confirmation, and we got in. So it's crazy. I mean, I bet not only Hotel Tonight, but you could probably do this in like Expedia, different services like that. There's probably some inventory left over across several of the places you can find hotel rooms. So we ended up getting to stay there. Great. Went up to the hotel room, got ourselves settled. My dad and I walked over to the Destiny USA Mall, got a lot of steps in. That's the beauty of a big mall of that vast size, is you walk around and all of a sudden you're at 8,000 steps. It's unbelievable. Nice walk on top of the biking. I was feeling good. I was going to get my food and drink in, and we kind of walked around, just figured out what we were going to do, and decided we're going to go to P.F. Chang's, which is always a staple, always a classic. That's a spring training staple for us as well. It's right across the street in Tampa from the hotel, another Embassy Suites we tend to stay at, which is on the outskirts of a mall as well. And so we went up, got we got a 7 p.m. Reservation, headed back to the hotel, got back with my brother. We said we'd go down to the manager special. We're down there waiting for drinks, and I'll tell you what felt like the entire Pawtucket Red Sox, which were the team playing the Syracuse Mets, obviously the AAA affiliate of the Red Sox, they were all down at the bar because they had a rain out that day too. Obviously, they were going to play the Mets, and so you're on the road early in the season. You got nothing to do in a rainy, kind of dreary Syracuse, and so you're just down at the bar the whole day. And boy, if you're a pitcher and you don't have anywhere to be the next day, or you're a starter down the road a couple days later, even if you're going to start the next day, you could have a certain amount of drinks and you're fine anyway. So they're just sitting around drinking, playing different like card games, things like that in the lobby. And we got to talking to them a little bit. And then I told my brother, I said, I think that's Terry Collins, the former manager of the New York Mets. So he was the manager of their 2015 World Series team that got to the World Series, NL Championship team. And he goes, oh, really? I said, yeah. Now, me coming from sports, being in the professional sports world at one point, and maybe over time, just, you get sapped of a lot of the enthusiasm you have for things. I was just going to leave him be. I wasn't going to say anything. I was just going to be content in the fact that I knew who it was, and I told my brother. My brother went right up to him and got talking to him and said, oh, you're my favorite manager. I love what you did for the Mets. It was one of the great moments. And he said, oh, for me too. We got to talking a little bit. Then Terry kind of sidled over to the side to get himself a drink or something. And my brother and I went on, got our drinks, got a couple IPAs, sat at a table in the back. And then at another point, maybe 10 minutes later, I told my brother, hey, Terry, I think is back there. So he had moved himself to the far corner of this lobby area with kind of a fireplace in the middle. And he wasn't with anybody. He was just sort of on his phone a little bit, just kind of looking for something to do, looking for kind of a conversation to be had. But you don't know. We don't really know him. He's on the road. I should back up a little. He's on the road because he's a special assistant to the GM of the Mets. And so they'll send him on these kind of trips where he can check out probably the AAA players early in the season, kind of give a report back to the team on what he thinks and who's doing well, who might be up for moving up at some point, or who might be a potential positive piece for the Mets in some kind of trade they're going to make. And so he just kind of roves around. Nice life if you can get it, I think. Terry's about to be, or is 70, so basically the age of my dad. And he was just back there. He's got no connections to this city other than being with the Mets. And so I told my brother, of course I wouldn't do this. I said, hey, when you go to get our other drinks, why don't you go by Terry and ask him if you can get him a drink? They're all free, obviously, so why don't you just see if you can get him a drink, get a conversation started? He's like, oh, maybe I'll do it later. Brother walks right up to him and goes, can I get you a drink? Terry says, no. And then I see him get our drinks, my brother get our drinks up at the bar, and then I see him starting to talk to Terry. And what he told me happened was that Terry said to him, hey, called him over, they started talking a little bit, and then at some point Terry said to my brother, screw it, I'll come over and talk baseball with you and your brother. We were like, oh, wow, okay. So Terry went up and ended up getting himself a drink, some kind of it's like a red drink of some kind, and came over to our table. And it was funny because at our table, one of the seats had like a handicap sticker on it. And I said, oh, here, you can sit here. And he goes, no, I'm not sitting next to a handicap thing. Someone will take a picture and send it around. And I was like, oh, okay. And so he sat across from me at a very square table. And my brother said to me, oh, I'm going to call Dad. He called my dad, no pickup. So he goes over to the front desk and he has them wake up my dad with the house phone there. He says, you get down here. We're talking to Terry Collins at Manager Special. And, it's funny that it's called the Manager Special, right? It's the Manager Special of the Embassy Suites. But I think when I would tell people, oh, it was the Manager Special, they're going, oh, it was some kind of set-up event where the manager of the Mets comes and you could talk to them. They don't realize how cool this was, how special this was, that this most recent successful net manager took the Mets to the World Series, and then the next season a very thrilling September leading to a one-game playoff loss to Madison Bumgarner and the San Francisco Giants, that here he is in this dreary Syracuse in a beautiful new Embassy Suites, and he comes over and sits at our table. And so my brother got him in, and then I had all the intel in my head. I felt like I was doing a podcast. It was really kind of invigorating. And I was just going all over the place, connections, tangential, like just how you would in an interview, in a conversation with somebody. And we got deep. He sat with us for somewhere around an hour and a half, I'd say. And it was tremendous. It was just inside baseball. The one time I can actually use that term and it completely fits. It was inside the game. It was inside the strategy. The amount of things that he told us where you had sort of a common feeling of what happened and how far from the truth it was, because the truth couldn't be told in the situation without blowing up the team, without wrecking the morale of the team. Oh my gosh. The relations with players, and a player who will come in and be like, I'm not playing tomorrow, and then the politicking you have to do with the other players to get them to help you in getting that player to play the next day in a pennant race. I mean, it was unbelievable, and we got so much out of it. We came up there to watch a baseball game, a AAA baseball game. Didn't happen, and our booby prize was the most recent manager of the Mets, breaking down any and all questions we had about the game. And I don't want to say a lot of what he said because it was truly a lot of the stuff that is off the record. It's kind of stuff he would never want me saying. He doesn't know I have a podcast, so I don't want to say some of the stuff and then all of a sudden it comes back on you. But man, we talked about the World Series. We talked about Daniel Murphy's unbelievable run. We talked Matt Harvey, Ike Davis randomly. We talked a lot about Barry Bonds. Terry Collins coached Barry Bonds. He was the bullpen coach with the Pittsburgh Pirates under Jim Leland. And that Leland connection came in very interestingly with the UNS Cespedes trade because of the connection between the manager and the former bullpen coach. And at that point, Leland was done managing, but he was a special assistant to the GM, as Terry is kind of now with the Mets. And he was kind of instrumental, that connection, in getting that Cespedes deal to happen at that time and really upend the season in a positive way and get the Mets to the World Series, because that run that Cespedes went on was just absolutely magical. And so we did a lot with that. It was unbelievable. I was shocked. We talked Mitch Williams because Terry managed him in Houston. That was really interesting. How important Ken Caminiti was to him. A name from the past who you'd not think. Just a lot of the stuff which was almost more major league than it was Moneyball. The things that go on, the human aspects that don't even have to do with the numbers and the and what happens on the field. Just to get players to that field is an unbelievable undertaking when you hear all this. So it was something else. I was shocked. An hour and a half. It was like our own podcast. So we said to my dad, happy birthday, happy 70th. We basically gave you an in-person podcast at the table. It just wasn't recorded. I wish I could have recorded it. And we'll see if I did take copious notes the next morning just to kind of remind myself as much as I could of all the things we talked about. And maybe through time, I'll try to seed some of the things I got on background here that help discuss aspects of Major League Baseball as it's happening. But I don't want to betray what Terry spoke to us about in confidence totally. But it changed everything. It was amazing. You're just sitting there on a Friday night having a couple of beers with Terry Collins. I mean, it was unreal. And it was funny because then I saw him when we got back from dinner. He was still at the bar talking with Pawtucket Red Sox and just going through more stories. You didn't want this to keep going because then you'd feel cheapened about your experience that he probably does this every night. But hey, who cares? We were there. We were around. Thank God to Hotel Tonight because we were able to stay there. Imagine if I got another hotel. And I love other hotels up in Syracuse. I used to go up there a lot because my brother went to college there. And several times a year, I would actually make the drive up there to take him home. But what I would do is I'd go a day early so I could stay in one of the many hotels in the region and just kind of check that out and use that as my payment for coming to get him. And I didn't want to have to get him and then turn around on what was then like a 4-hour drive going both ways. So I would go up the day before as early to check in as possible, and I'd kind of hang there. I wouldn't even see him or go hang with him. I would just kind of get him the next morning, and then we'd come home. But there are a lot. There's a really cool Crown Plaza that's just like a circular building that goes up, God, feels like 30, 40 stories maybe. I mean, tremendous hotel. And I was almost going to get one of those. I was almost excited by the opportunity to get another hotel. But there was the hotel we wanted to stay at. I got it on Hotel Tonight. And if it wasn't for that, we would not have had this 2-hour conversation. Or I keep inflating it hyperbolically here. We would not have had that hour and a half amazing conversation, the picture afterwards. We would have never had it. And, I give my brother credit. Sometimes that's a good lesson. You need to be a little more aggressive at times. You need to be a little more friendly, a little more gregarious and social, and good things come. Now, it's funny because like business, he was the guy who got the business, and then I was sort of the one, as they say in business, there's the person who gets the food, and then there's the person who's best at helping digest it. You need both aspects. And so I was able to keep that thing going for more than maybe the 15 minutes of intel or information he had to drive the conversation. I got in the weeds on a lot of stuff. I was talking to Asdrubal Cabrera. I mean, just everything. I mean, just weird in the weeds stuff. Like, one thing I'll say is I remember Asdrubal Cabrera just being such an impactful player when he came to the Mets. I didn't know of him before. You hear his name, but I never watched him. I didn't even know what he looked like. I didn't know how he played. I remember that at the same time as he came to the Mets, they got a player named Alejandro De Aza or something. And to me, they were both the same skill level. And De Aza was gone like before you knew it. And Cabrera became an integral part of the Mets team in that post World Series run. I mean, that second season, or that season after that 2016 season, the Mets were just really in the tank in August, and they had like a 27-15 run to finish it and end up at 87 wins and to get into that wild card game. But it was Cabrera hitting big home runs. It was Reyes actually hitting some big home runs. And Cabrera would get up around 20 home runs, and it was just a really impressive 20 home runs. He was clutch. A lot of times a player comes to you and they have a reputation that brings them in, and you go, oh, that's a great player. His numbers on the back of the baseball card say one thing. And then they come to you and they're not impactful. They don't hit in big moments. They accumulate hits that give them good numbers, but when it matters in high leverage situations, they don't get the job done. Cabrera was the opposite. He got the job done in the big moments, and his numbers were really impressive for his position, but they weren't like, oh my God, this guy's hitting 35 home runs. He hit like 17 to 22 impactful, important home runs in high-value moments. I mean, he was a player you did not want to face, and he was a player that when he was on your team, you wanted him up. He was just a hard out. He was a hard at bat. And so I remember bringing that up to Terry and how important that run and how that gets lost, that run, because they lost in the first in that one-game playoff. So it kind of gets lost to history. Unlike a 2015 run to the World Series where you just have so many great memories and it ends in a World Series appearance. And because of that, everyone thinks of it. But that next year, that was still a playoff run. It was a one-game playoff. But what they had to do was still just as exciting for a fan in September when you don't know if they win that one-game playoff. Maybe something special happens as you go with the pitching you have. And what Terry was saying was one thing. When I brought up Cabrera, he was like, well, he wasn't the greatest fielder in some of the positions we had to put him in as well, when he would have to play like shortstop or third. And he gave Tim Tuffle, the coach, the third base coach at that time, a really big pat on the back for what he did with analytics, and that they could basically pie chart the baseball diamond into exactly where every player who came up was going to hit it based on the pitcher. And Terry was like, the things he did with placing the players in the right spot, where we got outs because of analytics as opposed to the range of the player or the ability of the player to make, to cover a lot of ground, that they basically were placed where the person was going to hit, where the player was going to hit. He's like, that was a huge deal in allowing that season to thrive, because the pitchers weren't getting a lot of swings and misses as they were in 2015. They were getting the ball on the ground a lot. And so that Tim Tuffle kind of pie chart analytics process was so important. But yeah, it was really tremendous. I had a great time with it. And it really made our dinner amazing, like we were conquering heroes rolling into the P.F. Chang's 40 minutes late, I will say, because we weren't going to cut off the conversation with Terry. I did invite him, but he said, no, I'll stay here. So we got our picture and then went in, and it was great. A couple of media things. On the way up, I had decided, I was trying to read. I was like, you know what, on these 2 3.5 hour rides, I'm going to get a lot of my reading done. And then the best laid plans of mice and men go off to rye, as is said, because when I got down to it, I was like, I'm really not that into reading. And because there's no internet in the car, I was forced, well, forced isn't the word, but I only had available those shows which I had downloaded. And one show I had downloaded on Netflix was Punisher Season 2. And I'll tell you what, nothing was making me want to watch that show, but because I had to watch it with the fact it was the only thing downloaded, I watched episode 1 of Season 2. And unless this season drops off, it's possible it does. That opening episode was so good. I couldn't believe how good it was, showing up in random Michigan and trouble finding him, and his loved ones, his one night stand loved ones, getting put before the guns. I mean, it was unbelievable. So I'm really looking forward to watching more of that, thanks to the ability to have it downloaded. Netflix getting that ability in the last couple of years finally. It was really good, so I got to jump into that. But one thing I've done, speaking of Netflix, I've tried to treat HBO Go more like Netflix. Excuse me. This was something when AT&T bought HBO. There was a kind of a huge groundswell from the AT&T executives to not say that HBO was perfect as it is. Many people love HBO. It's a lot of quality over quantity. It's curated shows that tend to do very well. And what Netflix is it tries to get quality, but man, does it get quantity. It is releasing shows, greenlighting shows, greenlighting great auteurs and showrunners and all that to just create and to build up a backlog and a catalog of original content that makes it like the Yankees of streaming services. You just buy up talent and then hope it thrives and succeeds either now or in the future. And when you can binge it over time and finally catch up with it, who cares what the ratings are? Who cares how many people are downloading or watching? Just get that backlog of great talent in the system. And so because of that, HBO feels a little threatened. They feel a little pressured. AT&T buys in, and AT&T doesn't have the same philosophy that maybe HBO had before. So a lot of HBO's big people of the last 10 or 20 years have left. I'm thinking of Richard Plepler. I'm thinking of several other folks who I don't know their names. Plepler's the main name among them. I'm thinking of that, and his idea was the quality over quantity. There was plenty of quantity, but it wasn't coming out so much that you can kind of have press releases on this show, that show, all this content. And so AT&T wants HBO to be a little more like Netflix. And we'll see how that bears itself out over the coming years. But there are strategies in place to try to put HBO in front of as many people like Netflix does. But what I did is I said, you know what? Why shouldn't I treat HBO like Netflix, like HBO Go like Netflix, where I open it up, I subscribe to all the series I want to watch. I kind of add to my list all the great documentaries I want to watch. And then I try to methodically go through them one by one. And instead of HBO Go being a place I go to watch a show I already know I want to watch, how about like Netflix, where you open it up not knowing what you want to watch and then you go from there? So that was what I tried to do, and I've made a lot of headway through it. I've saved a lot of shows and documentaries. A lot of this started, I watched that Leaving Neverland documentary about the Michael Jackson and the two reported kids that purported kids that he molested, and those two kids are grown men in their maybe early 40s at this point, and they told their stories in a 2-part, basically, 4-hour documentary. And there's been a lot of discussion after this that's trying to discredit these witnesses, or not these witnesses, these victims. And for whatever it's worth, when I watched it, I'm not team Michael. I'm not team whatever. I appreciate his music. I still would appreciate his music with whatever happened, because it's good. The music is really high quality. His skills are, can't be denied. It's unbelievable what I should use unbelievable. It's unbelievable what a talent Michael Jackson was. I mean, when you hear the way he would put together songs just with his voice on like a little recorder where he would just overlay the different parts, the different instruments with his voice. I mean, it's unreal. What he could produce was just, you hear the songs and you're tapping, no matter what era, no matter what time in his life he was coming out with the music. It was just hit after hit. So I'm going to put that aside. I can still listen to it even after seeing this documentary. But seeing this documentary, the 2 victims were very credible. The things they talked about made a lot of, the things they talked about seemed very true, in the sense that they knew exactly what was being discussed. They were emotional, trying to recount it, and they gave a good reason for why they didn't say this while he was alive. It's sort of like a cult-like following in my head. And look, I'm not all in this story. I was watching it from the outside just as something that a lot of people have said is going to be an impactful thing to watch. But look, it made you sick. I mean, if this abuse happened like this, it's unbelievable. He cultivated the kids and the families for access to their children. And it made me think of today, like a colleague with a young child, or me eventually. Think about, like, in sports. It would almost be like Antonio Brown or Odell Beckham Jr., and you think, would you allow your kid to stay with Antonio Brown? My philosophy that I always feel in these situations is that I have never been that cool that celebrities are looking to be around me. If somebody is cultivating me, I'm always wary. If important people are coming after me, I'm always thinking they're looking for something, because in typical times where the waters are flowing normal, people are not seeking me out. I'm not saying that to be sad or insecure or depressed. It just is how it is. If someone is seeking me out, they're looking for something. So I would be especially so if it involved my children. I would not allow it to happen. I don't care who the person is. And I'm in sports. That's where I am. And it would really be like that. Would you go to Odell Beckham Jr.'s house, or Antonio Brown, right? Or a great quarterback, if you're a fan, and allow them to just be in their room with your child, and to be put in another part of the house, or to be put in a different hotel room on the other side of the building, and then they have your child? I mean, it's crazy. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense whether he was doing this or not, whether you believe it or not. Would you allow it? Think about it. Put it in your position. So that was what I kind of came out with that. So the other thing I was thinking when I was watching this, I never understand how people who take part in documentaries about something that's very sad or impactful in their life in a negative way, how they don't cry when they're talking about the time before the traumatic event. So like when the family and the parents are talking about how the kid got into the view of Michael Jackson by being an unbelievably talented dancer or singer when they were young. Like, I never understand how the parent doesn't already start crying there. Like, they're able to recount the events with such equanimity and really have no emotion to it. They're able to recount it with happiness. I never understand that. I would just be like bawling right away. Another one I saw was the Spielberg documentary. That's a long one too. I think it was 2 or 3 hours, and it was good. I got a lot out of that. One, I was shocked at how many things he's created. You know how many things he's created, but when you actually see it in totality and they talk about each major movie, it's unreal how much was created. I also liked that he's nervous. He said this. He's nervous every time he goes into a new shot. Doesn't know what he's going to do or what he's going to say or what's going to happen, and it always works out. So you're talking about the master of his domain, of his industry, the best at what he does, and he's still nervous about doing it every single time he goes to make a new shot. Every time he's nervous and has no idea what he's going to say. Nothing is rehearsed. It all happens in real time, and the best thing comes out. So he's neurotic all the time. Steven Spielberg, unbelievable. And a couple of things that really resonated with me from this documentary. He had the quote, "It was not fun to be me in between ideas or projects." I often feel that way. If you're not working on something, you feel like you're kind of not moving. It's like an inertia. It's like a plane that just stops in midair. Like you got to keep moving to feel good about your everyday. Another one was interesting. Liam Neeson, when he was talking about Schindler's List, he didn't like that he was being told what to say or do in every single scene, and that he felt like he had no free will as an actor in some ways, that there was no, opportunity to vamp or to kind of take things on his own, play within some bounds, but ultimately have a little bit of free will. And Ben Kingsley, who was in that movie, told Neeson, "A great conductor needs a good soloist, so just trust that." And it's true. It's a good little lesson. With Spielberg, his upbringing seemed to be so important to his movie themes. And it's true, like the parents who divorce when you're a child, like how many of his movies have to do with divorce, and how important that is to so many of the themes in the movies, and to really like when you think of E.T. being the thing that acted almost as a replacement to a kid who's kind of lost and outcast. It's just amazing. But what if you don't have the kinds of struggles and separations he felt? Like if you had a normal upbringing, I often think like if you didn't have a lot of friction growing up, if you didn't have things that forced you to be more mature than normal, or forced you to experience something as a kid that made an indelible mark on you in a negative or positive way, where do you come out as a creator? It's almost sometimes I wonder if to be a creator, you need to be a little off, right? To be a great creator, you need to be exposed at some point in your life, and you need to feel like insecure about something, because you're overcoming that every single day you go to create. You're creating art that tries to fill that in. But man, you just forget how much Spielberg has done. It's unbelievable. But again, when you watch that all of his movies have these same themes from his growing up, it's a good thing to reassess, or not reassess, just assess what from my life growing up, like we all want to be Spielberg, for instance. So we try to do things Spielberg would do, but do things you would do. What was special to your growing up? What were themes growing up that you experienced all the time that maybe you could turn into art? That's where I always think about the importance of not being derivative, but of being original, is truly speaking to who you are and the experiences you had. And that is an important lesson when you see that everything he does seems original, but it really comes down to 3 or 4 of the same themes he's just going over through different stories and narratives again and again. Another one, the Zen Diaries of Gary Shandling, I saw. I was not a huge Gary Shandling guy, but so many people have talked about this documentary that I thought it would be worth watching. See what Judd Apatow put together, who's made so many great pieces of media and art. And I liked one thing I saw from it, where Shandling went on The Tonight Show, and Bob Saget was with him. Bob Saget was backstage. And so Shandling went on The Tonight Show, Johnny Carson, and just destroyed it. Did an unbelievable job. Just had the place in stitches. Just tremendous success. And he came out and he said to Bob Saget, "I don't know what to do now, because this was all I ever wanted to do, and I just did it." And it's funny, because where did that take my mind but back to the New Jersey Nets? I got the chance to do exactly what I ever wanted to do, and I did it. I got to write about a team I loved, players I loved, I idolized, I looked up to. I ultimately got to go travel with that group around the country and stay in Ritz-Carltons and fly charter planes and go out to dinner with all the announcers while Yes Network was paying. I got to do so much. It was all I ever wanted to do. And no matter what I do afterwards, I'm always chasing something that won't quite give me the rewarding experience that did. Not to be depressing, but just I did what I wanted to do. And I've never found that next thing that was as important as going into that as I got to do. And very many people don't even get the chance to come within 75% of the thing they always wanted to do. And so they keep hobbies, or they do things that maybe dumb down those thoughts so that they don't have to think them. I got the chance to do it, and it was like the greatest hit of a drug you ever had. And so coming out of it, what's the next thing? No matter how many things I throw myself into, at that point in life as an early 20s kid who was blogging about the Nets, I got there by the time I was 25, and I'm traveling with the team. And what is ever going to be that impactful? Having kids has been one of the most amazing experiences of my life. Being married to a beautiful woman has been an unbelievable experience in my life. Things I never thought I would necessarily do, and that I was happy with maybe not doing. But the magic happened for me in that respect. But it was never as magical at the moment in life when it happened as when I got to travel with an NBA team, the NBA team I grew up rooting for. And I got to tell their stories and live their lives and be with them and amongst them. And it was unbelievable. So the other things I've been interested in. So a couple of shows upcoming or movies upcoming in the next year on Netflix. I'm so excited. The Irishman by Martin Scorsese. This has like everybody. This has like De Niro and Pesci and go look up The Irishman on IMDb. This thing I think is coming out in the fall. Unbelievable. The Laundromat by Steven Soderbergh. It's a movie about the Panama Papers. So I'm really excited about that. Soderbergh has one called High Flying Bird on Netflix right now. It's about NBA and an agent and a player trying to go to the pros, I think, from college, or try to kind of beat that one and done rule. I forget what the story is in particular, but a lot of people say that's a great movie. One show that I watched, The Widow on Amazon Prime. This has Kate Beckinsale, and it's made me think. Kate Beckinsale's been in a lot of our view a lot lately. We're thinking of Pete Davidson, right? She's dating this guy who's 20 some odd years younger than her. She's going to Rangers games, kissing him on the kiss cam, and I was like, wow, is this the best form of television show promotion there is? You got this guy who just got off with Ariana Grande, who was they were engaged, right? And all of a sudden you got a new series coming out on a streaming service, Amazon, where people aren't dying to go watch TV shows as they are like on Netflix. And it's a very ambitious show, and you want to get some buzz. Hey, Pete Davidson. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but it did feel weird that all of a sudden Kate Beckinsale's in my view. And then all of a sudden I open up my Prime video app, and it's like, oh, Kate Beckinsale show. I go, let me give it a shot. And I did give it a shot. I binged it. It was not very well reviewed, but I'm really enjoying it. It's almost like a thriller novel. I like the different locations that you're watching a movie in that I'm used to. It goes from Rotterdam to the Democratic Republic of Congo to the Welsh countryside. The cinematography was nice. It almost has a lost feel. So what it is Kate Beckinsale is married to a guy who does work in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they live in, I think it's Wales, right? And so she gets word that he goes down on a plane in the Congo, going from one city to another. And then 3 years later, she sees on CNN or one of these, worldwide news shows, she's seeing like a riot happening in the main city in Congo, and she sees her husband. 3 years later, he died on a plane crash. What the heck? And so it follows her on the path to figure out what happened. And there are amazing turns and twists and stories that it surprises you a lot. Now, a lot of people say it's a template by the person who wrote this TV show. I think it's a two-person group, and they've done other shows that have been very well received. Like I think The Missing is one. That's the real good one. So they say if you see The Missing and then you see this feels very derivative, and it's like a template of what these guys do. But I didn't see that, and I just saw The Widow, and I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was really good. Kate Beckinsale was good. There were moments where it kind of jumps the shark a little bit, but overall, man, being in like the diamond or whatever the mineral they're mining, being in that trade, being in the Congo, being in Rotterdam, I would recommend it. It's a good one, but it had a lost feel with the plane crash and the flashbacks, a lot of flashbacks. I like shows that, you think they're going one way, and then they reveal themselves to be to have much more depth with the flashbacks. I love it. I love flashbacks and just being like, oh my God, there's a world here that you have no idea where it can go in the different storylines. I would recommend it. So yeah, I actually saw. It's funny. After binging that, I saw Kate Beckinsale on Kelly and Ryan show. You know, the Ryan. What's his name? Ryan C. What? How do I forget his name? Well, you know Kelly and Ryan. I think it's ABC. It used to be Kelly and Michael Strahan. But I'll tell you what. When I was watching them interview Kate Beckinsale, I was like, you know, Kelly and Ryan are amazingly good at what they do. They're like the highest level of conversational professionals. I was walking my baby around watching them do their open, and it's like when you do podcasting and interviews and all this, how chummy and it's forced conversation, but it feels organic. The things they talk about. Oh, so you went to a restaurant last night, and they set it up and they knock it down. I was actually pretty amazed in the moment watching that, getting ready to see Kate Beckinsale. You know, it's funny. I didn't want my wife to see I was watching that, not because it's Kate Beckinsale, but I don't want her to know I saw this TV show, The Widow, and then I watched it without her. You know, it'd be open to too many questions. Again, it's like stream cheating. It's just as bad as actually cheating. With Kate Beckinsale, I might get credit for that. But yeah, so that's where I am. A lot of stuff going on, and there will be a lot of stuff happening as we move forward. We got the national championship game tonight. We'll see what happens. We got the Masters coming up, the one golf tournament I really watch from the beginning to end. The other ones I will watch if a certain player is in contention, but it's not as much appointment viewing as the Masters, because the Masters is sort of the unofficial start of warm weather. You know, you pass off from the college championship game into this Masters. You got baseball rolling for a couple of weeks now. It is the unofficial start of warm weather. I'm not going to say spring. I'm not going to say summer. I'm going to say warm weather. We're all good from here on out until it gets too hot that we're wishing it gets a little cooler. But that's where we are. So appreciate it, friends. I'll talk to you later.